So, hello everyone. My name is Charmaine. My Instagram is the Canadian Wonder, and my mission is to really help people to travel cheaper, longer, and happier on a budget. And then I always do IG lives to also bring in different travel experts to learn about how they travel more. Today, I have Nick and Anna with me, which I'm super excited to have with me. So thank you for coming. And did you guys want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, it'd be great. You can go first.
Yeah, thank you for having us, by the way. So my name is Anna, and I am originally from Chicago.
My name's Nick. I'm also originally from Chicago, and we are both, like you said a little earlier, digital nomads. So slow traveling digital nomads is sort of the phrase that we've coined.
Yeah.
We both work full-time jobs while traveling, and we like to inspire other folks to do the same.
Amazing. And I think this is a great platform to do that, of course, to not only meet other people, but seeing how other people are traveling and how people have really made it a priority, which is something that I really want to showcase here on Instagram. So I wanted to talk a little bit about today about your, how you travel, about how you make, balancing your full-time jobs, like you said. So I guess my first question is, do you guys travel full-time, and how did you prepare for that?
Yes. So we do travel full-time. Next month will be a year since we left our home back in Chicago. And how did we prepare for this?
It was definitely a labor of love. We had prepared probably about 6 months to a year in advance by sort of planning out the places that we want to go, selling and condensing a lot of our stuff. A lot of our friends ended up with some of our things, and one of our friends out there still has a Peloton bike. So it was definitely a process for sure. But once we sort of set the first place we were going to go and bought the plane tickets, it was like, there's no turning back now. We bought the non-refundable tickets.
I think actually setting a deadline is what made it real, because from the moment that Nick and I met 6 years ago, we both had a really big passion for traveling and always wanted to do this full time. So the second the opportunity kind of presented itself where we both had remote jobs at the same time, we were like, all right, we got married back October of 2021. And then after the wedding, we started kind of prioritizing full-time travel and spent the 6 months downsizing everything. Because back home in Chicago, we had a 2-bedroom and 2-bathroom condo, which is a good size amount of an apartment, right? Not too big, not too small, but you start to accumulate so much stuff. So it was 6 months of trying to downsize, what do we want to keep in storage? What do we want to get rid of? What can we donate? And our friends definitely got a good bunch of stuff.
For sure.
Well, at least it's being loved by somebody else.
Amazing. Yeah, it sounds like definitely a lot of work. So did you prioritize in finding a remote job to make that happen, or what was the process for that?
A great question. So both of us at the time already had remote jobs. I was already fully remote because of the pandemic, and Anna had recently transitioned from her job that she went to school for to a remote job as well. Do you want to talk about maybe what you did before?
So a little bit of a backstory on me is that only over the last 2 years have I been working in tech. Prior to that, I was actually a nurse. And then the pandemic happened and I got very, very burnt out from my work. So during that time, kind of realized, okay, what do I want to do? What is this career shift that I can do? So I would say that I did a major 180 and now I do work in tech, but I can say very happy and lucky about it, because had you told me 2 years ago that Nick and I would get to be, traveling the world and working at the same time too, I wouldn't have believed it. So here we are.
Amazing. And I've actually heard a lot about, tech jobs being great remote jobs. So did you specifically look for tech jobs in order to be remote, to make that reality of traveling full time?
I mean, I have been working in tech since I graduated school, just for, working for startups, account management, sales, that type of stuff. There was a point in Anna's career as a nurse where for mental health, for just physical health, like we both agreed you need to get a new job. So sort of that transition into like, how do I transition my skill set out of nursing into tech or sales or account management? Like that was sort of the struggle and the move to tech for her.
Yeah, because I will say that, initially when that was happening and I kind of like realized, okay, I need to start prioritizing my own health because, as a career with somebody, I would take care of people for a living and I wasn't taking care of myself. And it was unfortunately like a very hard decision for me to step back from that. And initially, I was looking into, there are telehealth jobs available for nurses out there. So there are other options as well. But for where I was at my place in life, I just wanted to kind of take a step back from it and also just, see what I can do with like my skills. And it was definitely a little bit of a tough transition in the beginning because I was so used to communicating with people in person. And then it was like, hey, now you have to talk to customers over the phone or like over Zoom. So that was a bit of a transition. But I will say that all the things that I've learned in like my past jobs kind of got me to where I am today with, like I used to be a bartender at one point, like I was a nurse. So communicating with people and just talking has always been something like within me wanting to help people. So I think even though I am in the tech world now, I've been able to like transition those skills and use them in a good way. And I will like kudos to my husband because he helped me kind of find that confidence because when the search first happened, there was this panic that set inside me where I was like, my degrees say like nursing, like what can I, like, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I'm supposed to study. Like, I don't want to go back to school. Like, I can't afford to go back to school. And Nick was the one that kind of helped me to realize like, okay, like, let's look at applications. Like, let's see how your skills can translate. So he was very helpful with that. And I quickly kind of moved my way up a little bit within the corporate ladder. So now that's been like a nice improvement as well.
Amazing. And yeah, and I've heard a lot about that too. And that a lot of people are saying that tech is a very, like, it's not easy, I would say, but it's like you can bring those skills and you can transfer them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think the main thing for her and for a lot of folks that I talk to for like career counseling and stuff is the confidence piece is like, I've been doing this my entire life. I don't know how to do anything else. I don't know how this, my current skill set could translate to maybe account management or sales or something else, even in like, I don't understand. So just knowing that you have skills and if you are able to hold an adult conversation, there is a job out there for you in tech, I promise.
Yeah, and I think there's a stereotype where most people think that, tech means that you have to be a coder or you have to be an engineer of some sort. But I think there's a lot of people trying to break down that barrier right now, saying that, tech can be customer service, it can be business account management or business development. And there's so many more fields out there than just, being behind a computer and coding.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I know for me, and even like talking to some of my other friends, they're like, did you have to take courses? Like, what did you have to do? And like the qualifications that I had, it's like once you get into a tech job, like they will teach you how to use the software. They will teach you how to use, like the CRM or the tools that you have to be documenting within. You're going to get trained in that. That's no problem. It's just, like, can you talk to people? Are you a problem solver? Like, are you quick on your feet? Like,
Very teachable,
yeah,
coachable.
exactly. Those are the things that like they tend to look for.
So what did you think helped you to transition from being a nurse to a tech job, or maybe even some of the main qualifications you think that was helpful for that kind of transition?
I think for me, so I went from nursing to sales, which was a giant 180, right? But for me, where I was working at, I was able to work with business owners, and it was just being able to use my skills of like being empathetic, like communicating with people, trying to figure out, a lot of the times, even in nursing, there might be like an underlining cause to certain feelings and things that are going on, and like just trying to like dig deeper within conversations and get to like, like what is the pain point? Like, how can we help this person? That sort of thing. I think that was the things that kind of helped me the most. I'm also very like hands-on and like quick to like learning and like teaching, and those are my two favorite things as well. So I think for me, it kind of went hand in hand where like if I was able to kind of work with my manager one-on-one and like, they would show me how to do something within the system, like I would just have to visually see it done like once or twice and I could catch on really quickly. But I think too, the most important thing is, like Nick said, like, are you coachable? Like, are you willing to like take advice and, like not get bent out of shape about it and like take, criticism like with a grain of salt, like in a positive way, obviously. So I think those are like the most important things if you are trying to like transition.
Amazing. And I think those are great tips. And I think a lot of people think, like I said, a lot of people think it's not such an easy transition, but is really using that language. Like, what are they asking for in that job posting, and then trying to reword that based on whatever experience you have.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So that was great advice. I really enjoyed that because I feel like tech is such a big industry right now, and a lot of people are trying to transition to it because of the flexibility, because of the remote work, because of the different skills and the different jobs that are available out there. But another thing I really wanted to know about is of course, we were talking about travel, but like, what is your traveling style? How do you travel?
Yeah, that's a good question. I previously mentioned we are slow travelers. What does that necessarily mean? We're digital slow nomads. What does that term really mean? So we try to embrace digital nomadism, being able to work from wherever, being able to do your job from wherever. But instead of traveling, like a regular vacation where it'd be like for a weekend or a week or a couple of weeks, we try to do at least 1 month per place or per location. We find it has lots of benefits. We can get into that in a little bit, but our style isn't, I wouldn't say luxury. It's definitely not budget, but
like in the middle,
somewhere in the middle of those two. But we try to do long travel as much as possible.
Yeah, because I would say too, the difference is like even like how we used to travel before we did this. Like Nick and I we were definitely more budget travelers before, and like like we would get whatever the cheapest Airbnb was, like wherever we needed to stay just to kind of like rest our head and like explore within the city. But we were always the type of travelers that would jam pack our itinerary and like try to see as much as possible within the couple of days that you have in a city, or like hop around and try to see like 3 different cities within a week, right?
Or you need a vacation from
I was going to say, yeah, you usually need a vacation from that vacation because you get so tired. But when we realized like, okay, we're going to be traveling like long term and moving every month, the priority then kind of shifted within our living quarters. So we do monthly Airbnbs is what we've been using the last like year, and it's been going pretty well, I'd say.
I'd say it's worked out pretty well.
But then obviously like within that, like you are doing like a long-term stay. So it usually is a little bit more, but I will say too on Airbnb, it's helpful when you do long-term stays, because if you do like, I think it's 28 days or more, you usually end up getting like 30 to 50% off like what the host would normally charge like per night.
So it's usually pretty steep discounts if you do those long-term stays.
Yeah.
Part of the reason why we do it as well.
Yeah, I've actually definitely have heard of that. And I also heard that you can negotiate with the owners as well because you have direct contact with them on the platform. So you can negotiate the rates as well. So I have heard that Airbnb is great for long-term stay.
Yeah, and we do that all the time too. Like if we see a place we really like, and I think one of our next places that we're going to is we're staying back in Cape Town for 3 months. And we actually had met this person before and chatted through Airbnb. We sort of negotiated a deal for 3 months, which is pretty cool. Yeah. So definitely don't be shy. If you don't ask, you don't receive. That's the advice.
The answer is always no unless you ask.
Right.
100%. And that's great advice.
Yeah, and I think
I did that.
Oh no, I was gonna say,
go ahead.
We even had like one instance too where when we first started our travels, we went to Utah, and it was kind of a scarier situation where unfortunately our Airbnb dropped out last minute. There were I think a pipe burst or something, and the person had to cancel on us, and we were supposed to be moving within a week. And in that situation too, we were able to kind of reach out to other people like, hey, like this is very last minute, and negotiate down like a little bit of prices, because it worked out for us because we got like a little bit cheaper rent for that month, but then I'm sure it worked out for the host because then they got somebody to live in their place for a month. So it was a win-win situation.
Yeah, and I've actually heard of that too as well. Like sometimes those last minute deals are great as well because obviously they want to get that filled for the month. There's a little bit more income for the host.
Yeah. And it's less turnover for them as well. I mean, you've got to think about it from their perspective where it's, if you've got 5 different tenants in a month or 5 different stays in a month versus one, it's a lot less stress and a lot less turnover for you.
Yeah. Cleaning.
Yeah, I was gonna say they have less cleaning. They don't need somebody to come in and manage and change the keys and pass on the keys to the next person. Those are 100%. And I wanted to ask about how do you decide on your location? How do you decide on how you move from one place to another?
So I think when we originally started our travels, right, we just kind of went west a little bit from Chicago. We're like, okay, let's try to do this in like North America a little bit. And then after that, we did have a planning, like timing wise, my cousin was getting married in Poland and we're like, okay, like this will take us overseas. Like we can do Poland and then we can do some more of like Europe. Some places we based off of either, have we been there before or have we not? Because we've lived in places that we've gone back to or completely brand new places. After we did 90 days in Europe, just for those that aren't aware, like you with a US passport, you can only be within the Schengen area for 90 days, and then you have to leave for 90 days. That doesn't necessarily mean you got to go back home for 90 days. You just have to leave Schengen. So when we were looking at that, we were coming up on wintertime and we were like, okay, we don't want to maybe, go to the UK and deal with wintertime there because there are countries in Europe that aren't in the Schengen area, like UK, Bosnia, Serbia, like a lot of Eastern European countries where like you can still stay in Europe, but just not in the Schengen area.
Okay.
But we didn't want to hit winter time. So I remember I was looking at a map and trying to figure out time zones. And I kind of convinced Nick, like, hey, let's go to South Africa because it's in the same time zone as Poland. And
it didn't really take too much convincing. You're like, hey, this is your time zone and it won't be cold. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like, be sold.
It'll be summertime there. We just got to fly 14 hours south.
Yeah.
So
I'd say like overarching themes of how we pick our places is like we want to stay within the Schengen visa rules. We still want to maximize like the 90 days. And then like basically figuring out where we want to go after those 90 days to stay outside. With the way that we work, we still work United States sort of East Coast Central time hours. So we can't go too far east without us end up working like overnight. So pretty much anything in like Asia, anything further than Dubai is really not going to work. So anytime that we're going to be there, we're going to be taking regular PTO, just like regular travelers, that type of stuff. So.
Yes, and I think that's something I really wanted to ask as well, like the time zone, because I think that's one of the most challenging, depending on your working hours. And I mean, some jobs obviously have more flexibility, like if you're a freelancer or you work for yourself. And I know there's a lot of coaches out there, but if you're working with a regular job, a lot of times there's a time zone.
Definitely.
So,
and I think
right,
that's definitely a shift from when you're working in your house and you work your regular 9 to 5, when it's 5 o'clock, you're done for the day. When you're working sort of remotely, it's like, okay, depending on what time zone you're constrained by, like you need to work until 5 o'clock that time. So it's just sort of, like I said, a mindset shift. We have the beginnings of our days to sort of do whatever we want. And then we start work usually around
4 p.m. like our time.
And we work until
and
oh wow, okay,
it's not as
it's not bad.
Yeah,
it's not
as bad as it sounds because, like Nick said, we at least like have the days off, right? Where a lot of times, like that's when you can do tours or like go around and explore the cities. So it hasn't been too bad of a shift. I think too for me because I used to work overnights in the hospital where I used to work 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. where I'm like 4 to 12 isn't bad. I can handle it.
Overnights is not the worst thing, or late nights is not the worst thing. It could be, the deal.
I also don't miss like waking up and then like rolling right into like a work meeting as well too. So I enjoy my slow mornings now.
And I think it's kind of nice that you get to explore in the morning, and then when everything's closed or when things are closing, you can then be at home and do the work. That
Exactly.
I actually see there's a question that came in already, so that's exciting. So the question says, do you feel any social pressure from your friends or family? Did anyone disapprove your lifestyle? If so, how did you deal with it?
We were just talking about this. Yeah, I'm honest. I would say it's yes. Before we left, the pressure was a lot higher from our friends and family. Love them, very supportive.
Yes,
Like, don't
love
get
you
me
all.
wrong. Shout out to the fam back in the Shy. But the pressure was, why do you want to do that? Why do you want to travel? Why do you have to go for so long?
Mhm.
My mom still says, like, hey, you could always move back home. Like, when I ask her, where should we go next? She's like, well, you can move back to Illinois if you want. I've seen that happen. But I think the best way to deal with it is, I see reels about this stuff all the time where, everybody's going to have an opinion on what you do or what you don't do.
Yeah.
If you say you're going to do something like travel for the next year, 2 years, 5 years, everyone's going to have an opinion if you do it. Everyone's going to have an opinion if you don't do it as well. My personal way to get over this is just do what makes you happy. Honestly, don't listen to anybody else because they have not lived the experience. And you've really, I hate to say like you only live once, but like you really have just one shot at this. And if you're not happy in what you're doing, then you should change it.
Yeah. And I would say too, like, don't let like others' opinions discourage you. Like, thankfully we are traveling together as a couple. So we do have each other to support within this, but we both heard it from both sides of our families. Like all of our parents thought we were pretty much crazy, or even to just from like friends, or maybe people that like we thought were our friends and are no longer our friends, like that sort of thing. I think, like Nick said, like if you want to do something, like you're going to prioritize it and you're going to want to do that, and like to not like don't focus on the negative things that people that are in your life have to say. I would say focus on those that are excited for you, right? That have that positive feedback. Those are the people that you want in your corner anyway, and especially with long-term travel, right? Like we aren't in the same time zone as our loved ones, or it's a little bit maybe difficult to like communicate with people if you're 7 hours ahead of them. But those that are like, your ride or dies are always going to support you and like keep in touch with you and that sort of thing. So I'd say, as cliche it is like forget about the haters and just focus on the positive.
Yeah, and I think that's really good advice. And you're right. Like everyone's always going to have an opinion, and everyone has their own lifestyle, what they want. So just because they don't want that, that doesn't mean that, or it's not the right lifestyle for them. That doesn't mean it's not the right lifestyle for you. So I think it's really understanding that everyone has different priorities and different lifestyles.
Definitely.
Okay, so my next question is, I guess, how do you finance your trip, and what are your monthly budgets?
Good question. We covered a little bit earlier as well, but we have full-time jobs. We pay the bills just like everybody else. We are fortunate enough to be in roles that allow us to do what we're doing, in addition to make enough money to be able to do something like this. The way we kind of mentioned this earlier, we're not budget travelers anymore. We're not luxury either. We are sort of somewhere in the middle. And what do you think, like, our budget, would you say is?
I'd say, well, if we look at like what are the biggest things that we spend money on, right? It's always going to be accommodations, our like flight or transportation, and then like groceries, I think are like the key three things that like we're always trying to pay attention to. When it comes to our accommodations, like we said before, we do monthly long stays on Airbnb. So I think our like main gauge that we kind of try to pay attention to is for it to be like our max is always $2,000, which for some people might be a lot of money, and for some people it might be not a lot of money. But we always try to compare everything that we do to like, okay, like how much would this cost us like back home in Chicago, right? Like, is it more expensive or is it like cheaper in regards to like us and like our lifestyle we are making? So I think 2000 is always the max. If you're traveling around Europe, right? Western Europe's going to be more expensive and you are going to hit that 2000 really easily. Eastern Europe, like we've stayed in places where it's only cost us $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
There being two of us, there's also another person to split that cost, which makes things a little bit cheaper. If you're a solo traveler, that obviously can be a bit more. But I think too, for us, because of our accommodations, like we both work from home. So our accommodation says a little bit different where like Nick and I both need separate working spaces, right? So when we're looking for places, like there has to be a kitchen table or something like that versus maybe if you're a solo traveler, like you can stay in a studio and it could be cheaper, right? Or you could do hostels, co-living spaces, that sort of thing.
And this by no means, like, we're not knocking the budget travelers. We're not knocking the luxury travelers at all. Everybody has their own style and what their sort of comfort level and comfort zone is for their budgets. I think for us, and really advice for anybody who's looking to sort of become a digital nomad or become a digital slow mad, is, just gauge it on what you spend now. What do you spend on rent? What do you spend on your car payment? What do you spend on your utilities? Sort of take that and transfer it overseas. Does your dollar or whatever currency you have translate to that country's currency?
Mm-hmm.
And is that okay with you in terms of the cost of living? Does that work for you?
Or even like transportation, right? Like we used to own a car back in Chicago.
Yeah.
Like we sold our cars. So now it's like that money goes towards airplane tickets or train tickets or, right now we're in Amsterdam. So we have like a monthly bike rental as a form of transportation around the city. So I think too, it's just kind of like looking at like, what was I spending on a normal basis back home? Like, am I making the same salary, that sort of thing, and kind of shifting it into like I guess a different point of view.
Yeah, and I think you said like 2000 a month, which is really not a lot because 2000 in North America or in major metropolitan cities, that's like rent, basically.
Exactly.
And that was one of the reasons why originally, like Anna was saying earlier, originally we wanted to do a lot of our trip sort of in the Pacific Northwest. We wanted to go to like Washington, Oregon, NorCal, SoCal, all of that stuff. But it was just expensive for what we wanted. It was like
3,000 for like studios.
Yeah, like 3,500 in a studio apartment, and I'm like, I can't
work and live with
this, like on top of each other working, and I can't. That's not going to work. So we started looking at alternatives. Sort of where we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess like you said, like it depends on where you are, Western Europe versus Eastern Europe, that budget kind of shifts as well. And I think another thing that I forgot to mention is also like looking at the currency that you earn because that makes a difference.
Sure.
So if you're earning in USD, but then you're spending in I don't know, let's say in Italy or Spain, like that money can go a bit further.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. And that's, I think, another reason that we are super huge advocates for going to Eastern Europe. Dollar just goes farther.
Yeah.
You can spend the same amount of money that you'd be spending back home, but you'd be, just living a much higher standard of living than you would be back.
For some Eastern European countries too aren't on the euro, right? Or their currency is a bit different too. So I know like when we were like in Poland, things were even like much, much cheaper for us because Poland uses zloty as their currency. And for us, just like everyday things, like we were able to then like save money that way just because our cost of living went down from what we normally would have spent on things back home in Chicago.
Yeah, that's great. And then also in terms of like, I guess your traveling schedule, like do you like to usually kind of explore in the morning and then kind of go back to work in the night? Is that the best way that you usually likes to organize your schedule?
Yeah, I mean, we'll explore like on the weekends for sure. We'll definitely pack our weekend stuff because we're not working, which is great, just like everybody else. But during the days, we'll do like half exploring and also like just get regular stuff out of the way. Like we have a video on our YouTube about just like going grocery shopping when we were in Barcelona. It's not all excursions and whitewater rafting and like jumping out of skydiving, all of this stuff. Like, no, we're regular people. We do regular things during the week.
Yeah, that's like, where do we get groceries? Is there a gym nearby that we can like sign up and get like a monthly membership? Where's the closest ATM? Like everyday things to laundry. But I always try to find us an Airbnb that has a washer in it so that we don't have to venture out and do laundry. And then too, like I think like depending on like the city as well, like some of them, like the newer places that we've been to, will obviously like explore that place like during the weekends. But before here, we were in Florence, Italy, and we had been there before, but we loved it so much we wanted to go back. That when we were in Florence, it's really easy to travel around Italy with trains. So every single Saturday and Sunday, we were taking like a 30-minute to a 2-hour train to like explore a different city in Italy too. So like we would go to like Milan or Verona or Rome and did kind of day trips as well. And that was a fun way to travel too, because we would still have our home base back in Florence, go out for the day, but then come back and not have to worry about bringing all of our bags everywhere.
Yeah, and I think that's something that people often forget about the difference between traveling and living abroad is that like when you're traveling, you can like pack your schedule, you can just kind of go and do all the fun things and just not worry about anything else. And you have that 1 week to yourself. But then when you're kind of living in a different area, like you said, like then you have to like do the normal stuff. You have to like find a place to live, you have to do the laundry, you have to do the groceries. So like I think people sometimes don't remember that like when you're living abroad is it's just kind of like normal living, but then you just kind of living in a different area or in a different country.
Yeah.
Or even like when I like, to get like haircuts, right? Like we're like always trying to find you a new barber in every single city that we go to. Or if I like go to get like a manicure or pedicure, I just got like my hair colored in Amsterdam too. Like, right, that's a whole other thing as well of like trying to find businesses in different countries to do like specific services too has been another like
challenging
research thing for me to do.
100%. And I could imagine like a lot of different language and cultural barriers too, because you're always on the move. So you're like, you just adapt it to, I don't know, living in Amsterdam for the month. And then you're like, oh, now we have to shift to a different country in a different language suddenly.
When I was getting my hair cut in Barcelona, the guy was like, how much do you like? I didn't speak Spanish, he didn't speak English. And I was like, just don't touch this. And he thought I meant like
shave it off. Yeah.
Thing. So he's like, he showed me the clippers, and I'm like, oh, no. Like, do not, don't touch this. Just this part. You run into those cultural things and you run into those language barriers. And like most of the time, it's just funny. Like,
yeah,
it just makes for good stories.
Or like when we shifted from like Eastern Europe to like Spain, I remember, because I speak Polish and a lot of Eastern Europe is different Slavic languages. And when we got to Barcelona, I like said something to the person in like Polish and I was like, oh, I'm in a different country. I need to like transition my brain to a different language. Or when we went from Spain to Florence too, like then we started speaking like Spanish in the beginning of our Italian trip.
It's like just enough time to get used to the language and know at least enough phrases to get by, and then you're going to. So.
Yeah, and I can see how challenging that can be as well. And also a mind shift. You have to be super adaptable.
Definitely mind shift.
Do you usually try to pick up a few phrases before you go to each country, or what do you usually do?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Hannah speaks fluent. She's fluent in Polish and English, so she's bilingual. So that was super helpful. And like she was saying, a lot of the Slavic countries share similar languages and words. But 100% huge piece of advice for anybody traveling, not just for digital slow mads, but people traveling overseas, learn some phrases, immerse yourself in the culture a little bit and learn how to say thank you, please,
hello,
where is the bathroom, like the easy stuff that you should know to function as a human being overseas. We definitely try to learn those things before we go, but sometimes we just pick up.
Yeah, and I would say too, like Google Translate, I'm sure everyone has it on their phone now. That's a lifesaver. Too, like we'll use Google Lens, like if we're grocery shopping, like the one time we were in Budapest and I was trying to find, washing detergent and I can't breed Hungarian. So like I was using Google Lens because I'm like, is this fabric softener or is this detergent? So you run into those like minute things along the way as well too, because I did have an instance where in one country I bought yeast when I thought I was buying butter. So you live and you learn. So Google Lens always.
Nice. And yeah, and grocery shopping in a different country is so difficult.
Yeah. So I always have pictures in my phone of like different aisles or something I was trying to translate.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And I think, yeah, and maybe even just having like pictures of things that you want to find. So then you could like ask people, do you have this?
Yeah.
Like that's a good idea. I haven't actually thought about that. I just remember being in the aisles and translating for like a good 10 minutes standing there.
I think you've done that before too.
Yeah, last time I went to the grocery store, I was like, do you have vanilla extract? And he was like, I have no idea what that is. And I showed him a picture of it and he's like, yeah, we don't have that. And it's because they do have it. It's just like a totally different product. It's called something totally different. But again, these are things you just learn as you go. You can't prep for everything.
Yeah, 100%. Well, thank God we have phones, right? For translation, for pictures. And as I said, like maybe keep a couple pictures on your phone and be like, do you have this? This is the thing that I'm looking for. All right. I want to also ask about, so I guess, what are some of the challenges that you face traveling full time?
Do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I think I kind of touched upon it like a little bit earlier. Traveling full time sometimes can get a bit lonely. And I say this like with my husband sitting next to me. We are together pretty much like 24/7, but sometimes you do miss like your friends or like your family back home, that sort of thing. So I think too, the biggest challenge is like trying to stay in touch with like your loved ones back home when there is a time difference. But I think just prioritizing that or reaching out to those that like you miss, even if it's just like a simple like, hey, miss you, like I'm thinking about you, like hope you're doing well. That's been a bit of a challenge for me personally.
Yeah, I think to add to that as well, as we get closer and closer to the date in which we're going to travel, the anxiety levels amongst the two of us sort of go up until it's the day before and we're packing 6 hours before our flight. We do it every single time. Highly do not recommend. Just have some planning, have some foresight. We're getting way better at it. We're getting way better at making sure all of our stuff fits into suitcases.
But we have a system.
We have a system.
Each month it gets better.
We're trying to fix it so it gets very smooth. But I think one of the big challenges too, this was right at the beginning, is getting rid of all your stuff. Sentimental value with your clothes. I will fight to the very end to argue this point, but I had shirts that I didn't know that I had for the longest time, and I had to throw those out. All kinds of stuff like that. We condensed all of our things that we have now into 2 suitcases and 2 backpacks. And that's it. And really, everybody is really impressed and shocked that we could fit all our stuff in there, but you don't need that much stuff. I promise.
Or it's like the panic then of like, if we did buy new things, it's like, okay, we got to like either replace something that's in the suitcase.
Right.
Like, how can we make extra room for these things too? But I think over the last year too, it's taught us to be like way, way less materialistic than we like used to be.
Yeah, like I used to buy all kinds of stuff, and now I'm just like, do we truly need this thing? Like, it's not, whatever. So.
Yeah, definitely. And it's true. We don't really need a lot of things. It's just that, we just see new things and we're like, oh, that's flashy and that's pretty. And then, you just kind of accumulate things without recognizing that.
Yeah, and like we were saying,
stuff.
Yeah, like we were saying earlier too, like if you have the space for it, you're going to fill it up with something. Like we had a 2-bedroom, 2-bath in Chicago, and it was full of stuff.
Yeah.
It was full of things. And like when we were getting rid of all of our stuff, I'm like, where did all of this stuff come from? So, that's, I think, one of the biggest things that we deal with is the pre-packing anxiety, the getting rid of our stuff. And this is before we left. And then also, what were you using?
Just like the isolation is making new friends.
Yeah.
Right? Like in new countries, because we're only here for so long. Some countries are really good about it. Other countries we've been to and have not made a single friend. But But I think too, that just kind of like depends like how much you're willing to put yourself out there. Any other things, like sometimes the planning can get like a bit stressful because we have been like trying to plan everything out like 3 to 6 months ahead of time. So there can be some anxiety around of like, hey, like where are we going to next? And like once we have that all planned, but then simultaneously at the same time trying to plan like, what are we doing this month in Amsterdam? Or like, what are we doing next month when we go wherever? So just kind of the planning, sometimes like I enjoy it, but sometimes when there's a lot at once, it can be a little bit anxiety inducing.
Yeah, and I can see how stressful that can be as well, because you always like, you haven't even done that trip, but they have to plan out the next trip at the same time.
Yeah. They're just researching, and I'm like, what am I even doing this week?
Nice. So you guys are big planners to think to plan everything ahead of time.
Logistically, you have to be. You have to know sort of what's coming, and especially with all the rules, visas, and everything. Like you should know what's going to be coming up for at least 3 to 6 months.
And planning ahead of time a bit more with like accommodations and flights, you're gonna save money, because if you're doing constant like last minute bookings, like you're going to be paying more than like if you try to book your place out like 3 to 6 months ahead of time, or buying a plane ticket, for in a couple of weeks versus if you try to buy it like 3 months ago, the price is gonna fluctuate like a lot.
Yeah, 100%. And then I guess one of my last questions, what advice would you have for somebody who wants to travel long term?
My first thing would be, if you want to do it, just do it, right? Like, don't let other people's opinions affect like how the way you want to live your life. It is your life, and you should make the decision for yourself. If you do want to do it right, prioritize it, like start making a list. Give yourself that deadline, like, hey, like maybe if your lease is coming up in July, 4 months ahead of time, like start thinking about like if you do want to do that, and instead of re-signing a lease somewhere else, like, take the jump and go and like travel.
Book some time overseas, book a month overseas, and that's your deadline.
Yeah.
I think the scariest thing for a lot of people, and this isn't just with travel, I think it's with a lot of big decisions, you put so many things ahead of the big decision. You're like, oh, well, what happens when I get there? Or how am I going to get rid of all my stuff? Or like, all of these things that haven't even happened yet. And you get so freaked out by this that you don't take any action at all. My advice is almost identical to hers, where, if you want to do it, just do it. We'll help you take the first steps. We'll advise you. I mean, you could shoot us a DM, and we'll definitely try to do what we can to help you get there. But I think the main thing is stop overthinking it. Just, hit the book button and see where it takes you.
Absolutely. And like we said, like if we could do it, like you guys can definitely do it too. Like I said before, 2 years ago, I was working in hospitals bedside, and now I'm living with my husband in Amsterdam, and like
it's pretty sweet
getting to like work and live my life, which is a great thing too. So like if we can do it, anybody can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the most important thing is believing in yourself and really just starting, make the first step.
Yeah. You got to just, push the book button and just let it rip.
Or start slowly, right? Like maybe do a couple months, do a couple weeks, or go somewhere for like a month if you can like afford that, like with like rent, and then like a monthly accommodation. See how you like it. If you love it, then take the next steps of trying to make that full time and start trying to figure out where you want to be after your lease ends.
Yeah, 100%. And like, you don't have to do it, like, you don't have to make that big step at once. Like you said, you can do small steps, like trying for 1 month or trying for 3 months, and really seeing how you enjoy like moving from one country to another. Because I feel like that's not a lifestyle for everybody. Of course, it's just like, it really depends on what kind of lifestyle each person wants.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree.
Oh, and then also I wanted to ask, before I actually end this, I want to say, how long do you guys plan to keep traveling? Do you guys plan to keep traveling for another year or so?
Good question.
Yes. So originally our plan was to do a year, right? Like we were thinking about going back to Chicago next month in June. But as of a couple months ago, we decided to extend for another year. So we will not be going back to Chicago until at least like June of 2024.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mom and Dad. But we decided like, hey, we'll just keep this rolling until maybe it doesn't feel as exciting anymore, or if we do get burnt out. But that's like a tentative end date, but I could see us
I can see us continuing
for years.
Yeah. As long as we're able to do so. Mm-hmm. So we both love traveling. We both love experiencing new cultures, new things. So I don't see any end date. That's like the end date of next year is sort of like up in the air. It's probably not. We're probably going to keep going. Yeah, no tentative end. It's just
amazing. And yeah, and like I said, like you just keep doing it until you feel like this is something they don't want. And of course, I feel like with life priorities change, and you know your lifestyle changes as well. So yeah, exactly. So yeah, good luck with traveling. Good luck with everything else. Really glad to be chatting with you today. Thanks for so much advice. And yeah, I hope to talk to you guys soon again.
Yeah, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
No problem. Have a good night. Bye.
Thank you. You too. Have a good one.
Bye.